much, Tony, yet. Let me just kind of personally extend the same welcome. We're excited you're here. We're excited about the conversation. My name is Cheryl Walker-Lorado, and by title, I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Online. By passion, I'm an onliner. And being an onliner means we love to use technology to solve complicated, challenging business problems for our clients. And it has been a fun journey being part of that. Online's 35 years old, and our clients are based in Canada, the US, and like Tony was just sharing how TechExecs is growing, Online is also growing, and we now have clients in EMEA, which we are excited about. I think today's topic, unlocking the cloud, really kind of gets to the heart of who Online is. We like to say that digital transformation and cybersecurity, that's how we like to kind of refer to ourselves. And that's really because we believe at the heart of transformation, whether you're transforming your contact center, or you're creating a new digital product for an emerging business line, or you're using data and trying to optimize it for, to streamline processes, whatever it is, it's not just transformation alone. It has to be transformation coupled with cybersecurity. So we don't think of those things separately. We think of those things as very intertwined and very dependent upon each other. And I think today's topic, you're going to hear a lot of that, and how those two pieces really need to come together if we're going to ever really be able to unlock the value of the cloud or move into this concept of modern app dev. Now, the team we have today on our panel, I have had the privilege over the last number of years to get to work alongside all of these guys in some capacity. And I can say as a bit of a bystander, it is exciting to watch them as they work alongside our clients to bring new ideas to life and to really start to leverage things like the cloud as part of moving business forward. So I know I'm very confident we've got the right people on the panel, and I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have. Perhaps I could ask Larry, Kevin, and Adam to just take a minute and introduce themselves. Maybe you guys could share a little bit about what you do, during the daytime, and maybe one thing you like to do in your free time. Larry, maybe I'll ask you to start.
Sure, I can start. I'm going to say good day, folks. Kevin, I've learned not to say good afternoon. I work with teams that span 6 time zones right now, so no matter what I say, I've always got it wrong. Very happy to have you guys here and to hope to have a good dialogue. I'm a principal consultant with Online. I've been consulting for a few decades, let's leave it at that, in our DT practice. So I work with clients who want to transform their business, and I usually spend almost an equal amount of time on business strategy, understanding their business, working with them to develop, changing physical things to digital, envisioning new products, then putting the technology architecture in place to support that, and then driving that vision down, working hands-on with teams as they start to build out infrastructure and start to build new products. So, that's super, super exciting, especially in today's quick technology changing world. My second role is as director of our innovation lab. I work with some experts who apply technologies in novel ways to solve business problems that clients don't have a good way to solve. Outside of work, I've always loved design, so I love designing almost anything: buildings, cottages, sports clubs, you name it. I get involved in a lot of design activities.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Kevin.
I almost had to put $1 in the jar for talking on mute. So everybody, I'm Kevin Sigmundson. I'm Senior Director of Online's Digital Studio. So I've been with Online a very long time with Cheryl. My background is technical. So I started out as a developer in the mid-90s here at Online, and kind of done all kinds of jobs in between. But today I lead Digital Studio. Digital Studio is the part of Online that builds web and mobile products, and we build it primarily on a cloud backend. So I'm very passionate and familiar with the whys of why you would want to consider that, and the benefits. Interesting thing about me. So someone, very offensively brought up weight gain over the pandemic, but I didn't take offense. But interesting thing about me is that might have been a problem, but on the day my youngest child, my daughter, turned 18, we actually coincidentally happened to get a puppy. And if anything wants to take you back to having toddlers and children that keep you busy all the time, get a puppy, because you don't get 5 minutes free. So that has actually been a very effective way for me to shed a few of those unwanted pounds and maybe get off the couch and away from the computer. The only downside is now my puppy is 6 months old, and he now thinks he's smarter than me and that I work too much. So that's that's me.
Thanks, Kevin. Adam.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. Welcome. Thanks for coming out today. I'm Adam Krieger. I'm a senior security consultant with Online Business Systems. I also have a background in software development and application architecture. And then that kind of gravitated me towards security. And right as, cloud is taking off. So I specialize in cloud security architecture. Anything from secure configuration reviews, risk assessment, control baselining, the whole works is kind of under my umbrella. So that's what I do for work. My hobby is picking up hobbies. So if anybody can empathize with that, I tend to try something new, get way too nerdy about it. And then sometimes it continues on, and sometimes I end up having to sell a lot of secondhand equipment afterwards. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that, you guys. So here's what I'd like to do. First of all, I'd like to invite you just to consider yourself among friends today. Some of you we've met before, some of you we've worked with before, some of you this is the first time we've had a chance to sit down and chat. And while we're a little bit of a bigger group and we're doing this virtually, we really do want this to be an informative, casual, engaging conversation. So grab a pen and paper. Feel free to jot down your questions, or even better yet, put them into the chat. And I know Tony and his team will be watching that and kind of serving those up as they can. And we'd love to answer as many of them as we can today, or happy to take those questions offline and continue the conversation afterwards. So without further ado, why don't we dive in? Before we kind of get into the real meat of the conversations, we're going to use a couple of polls today. And I thought we'd flex our interactive engagement muscle here a little bit and start with the first poll. So Tony, if your team could put that poll up, that would be great. And we'll give everybody a chance to respond. But this poll question is really just trying to give us a bit of a baseline. Let's kind of come to a common understanding. What is your primary cloud platform that your organization is using to build out your modern application development projects on? So we've got a couple of options there. You've got Azure, you've got the cloud platform, you've got AWS, or maybe it's none of the above. We'll just give you a second to kind of respond. And then we'll get Kevin to kind of kick us off and tell us what he thinks of those answers, and then we can go from there.
Or maybe it's all of the above. I'm seeing an awful lot of hybrid cloud. Virtually everything I'm seeing is hybrid cloud, including legacy data centers on premise.
We'll give everybody one more minute, get your answers in there.
Let me know when to end.
Yeah. I was going to say we look like we might have had a neck and neck race there between Azure and AWS. It looks like Azure has pulled out ahead. Okay, that's probably great, Tony. For those of you that missed out, we'll be ready for the next one. Kevin, maybe with kind of that, we know lots of the people attending today are using cloud, but before we kind of shift into the conversation specifically around cloud, I wonder if you could kind of level the playing field, give us a little bit of a sense of what you're seeing as trends in modern application development. I know your crew does lots of that kind of work.
Yeah, for sure. And actually the poll result there really echoes what we're seeing. There's, in reality, there isn't really singular cloud environments. Just about everybody, for whatever reason, if it's a SaaS product, and maybe it's Office 365, maybe it's something that you use an AWS, but you're kind of in a multi-cloud environment. And it's good to see there's lots of people that are already in that zone. So some of the trends that I'm going to talk about, probably things that you're seeing. And the other thing to keep in mind is where I'm coming from is really from the angle of trends from a business or an impact statement. And the others on the call today, they'll talk more technically about trends within the platform, and they can answer those kinds of questions. So maybe if we just sort of move on to that first slide. So the thing that I've seen with our clients and in our practice is really this idea of thinking bigger because of the cloud. So broadening the horizons of what is possible from our company and with the customer experience. There's this comfort that we didn't have 2 years ago with moving digital touch points to customer experience. As we were in the pre-call here and we were talking, I was thinking back to other stats that I read in sort of mid-pandemic, and I apologize if I get the exact number wrong, but at one point, like 6 months into the pandemic, I read that 50 million Americans had bought groceries online for the first time in the first quarter or second quarter of 2020. And it just, so people were crossing that barrier of, I'm not, do these things online. I'm in an in-person world. And so those sentiments, our clients are wanting to pick up on those sentiments of our customers and begin to move out into that space. So the cloud essentially becomes that point of innovation because of the capabilities that it has, and lets you tap into the power, whether that power be for scale. If you have an idea, if you have an idea that does really well, you don't want to, you hope that you didn't scale the infrastructure to plan that it was going to be a modest success, and vice versa. So the cloud basically lets everybody, be safe and have dream as big as they possibly can. You want to click to the next one, and the other trend, so combined with this thinking big, is adoption. So if you've been to AWS conferences, I've been for a few years, you'll see the graphs that show how cloud has really been taking off. So when I say it's hitting an inflection point, it's hitting another inflection point. It's been hitting them for years. It's in a scary amount of growth in AWS. But from our practice, from the clients that I talk to, the sheer number of clients that had maybe focused cloud on software as a service, or maybe infrastructure as a service type workloads before, who are now have entered building modern applications using cloud platforms on AWS and Azure and others. I would say it seems like every second project is another client's first foray into that. So if you're in the mode, reason you're at this session is because your organization is going through this, trying to go from 0 to 1 in terms of modern apps, or even just to get better at it. And you're not alone. This is a major trend. We attended a Gartner conference the last couple of weeks virtually, unfortunately, hopefully in person next year. But today about 40% of new products, digital products, are being backed by the cloud. So it appears our clients are a little bit ahead of that curve, but they predict by 2025, it's going to be almost all. So 95% of products are going to be backed by the cloud, simply because it enables so much more to be done. And so, you're not alone, and you're in good company of people looking at increasing their AWS abilities and adopting that as a pattern for product development. That's really puts you in good stead with lots of other organizations. So that's a key trend. Then want to go to the next one. Oops. So we've got lots of power and it's widely adopted. That leads to shortages. So shortages in expertise to do this. So sometimes it's where my group comes in, and sometimes it's just our clients need to send their people for training or do other sorts of things. But really, it can be a struggle when your organization is focused on building things like they have for maybe the last 10 or 15 years, on-prem or in a data center based, that doesn't leverage cloud platforms, doesn't consider cloud security. You have these patterns in place, you're really good at them, but you don't have the time or the ability to really get leg up on cloud expertise. So we're seeing that as maybe a inhibitor to change. The good news is when you get over the hump and you deliver your first production products, and you have that kernel of a team, the benefits of doing that sort of create the business case for more training, for more emphasis in your strategy for building cloud expertise. That sort of becomes a virtuous cycle where it becomes a focal point for increasing capability, professional development, strategy, and those sorts of things. So, it's an overcomable trend, but certainly something that we need to be aware of. And I think some of the other speakers will talk to that later on too. I think there were 5, so there must be a couple more. On acceleration. So Amazon talks about the innovation flywheel and talks about, we can afford to be wrong if we're fast because we can course correct and we can make changes. If we're slow, and we think back to, I think about projects we delivered, say in the late 90s, 2000s, big monolithic projects where even the infrastructure stand-up might have taken months. I mean, can't afford to be wrong because you don't have the time to do that. But in this world where we're using cloud native platforms, everything has the power to be accelerated. So even at the basic level of getting a project stood up, going from idea to vision and prototyping to implementation has never been faster. Being able to stand up dev environments, being able to bring in security, and do that at a click of a mouse, as opposed to long procurement cycles or other more complicated ways that we used to have to stand up projects. The cloud platforms themselves, again, Adam and others will talk about sort of what value they bring. But we've had clients that have built products that target, million plus users and been able to provide, real important jobs, fill a really important role for those organizations, but build them in a matter of weeks because we're leveraging cloud, out of the box cloud platforms that take away the need for custom code and make things more serverless and make things more secure so that they have fewer barriers. So the cloud kind of accelerates in many different ways, again, tied to that expertise barrier maybe, but that's fact. And then the improvement of digital products. So I'm using all Larry's quotes. So Larry, thank you for the pre-meeting we had on this. But Larry will say things like, don't race the cloud provider. So if a cloud provider is investing in a platform for data analytics, you don't need to build your own data analytics or build your own AI or what have you. Those platforms will evolve faster and get better just by the nature of how it works. You tie into those, even as a lot of our clients are sort of large, medium-sized organizations, have $500 million to $1 billion type organizations who, albeit very large, don't necessarily have very large IT budgets. But by tying into the cloud and the capabilities, they're basically on equal footing with companies much, much larger than themselves. And I think the last trend really is teamwork. And I'm calling out product development, security, and infrastructure, but I could probably call out UX and development and others as a trend that we're seeing. But on the teamwork side, when it comes to sort of traditionally kind of slightly siloed, if I go way back in time, infrastructure teams, information security teams, product development or app development teams, they tended to work in their own bubble and interact with each other through formal deliverables or set meetings or approval checkpoints, which can really slow down projects. So if you sort of, for example, wait till the end of a product development cycle to go through security checks, that has a potential risk that could cause refactoring or those sorts of things. The cloud, although it doesn't really in and of itself make this teamwork happen, it creates this sort of common environment where there's no really separation of concerns. If you're a product development team, you're thinking about how you're going to structure this from an infrastructure point of view. If you're on the infrastructure team, you're thinking about securing it. So all these cross-cutting concerns, and combined with maybe a product mindset that focuses on the outcome instead of your individual area of responsibility, has, as a trend, has led to like a new superpower, which is the embedded security and infrastructure people within product development teams that help us move fast in confident manner. So even when we're taking on projects or products that have sensitive data in them, maybe cut into areas where there's a lot of visibility for an organization and it's sensitive, we can move as fast or faster than we could before when we have information security and cloud security folks as part of the architecture definition phase of the project, and working hand in hand with product development and frankly operations after we go into production. So it becomes, again, a superpower that if you can achieve it, and the cloud sort of helps you in that sense because you're all kind of motivated and gathered around the same technology, that can help too. So those are really the trends that I'm seeing. And of course, anybody on the panel, if they think that I missed something, feel free to like jump in. But kind of that's what I'm seeing from my perspective.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that plays well into some of the questions that are coming up, and we can extend some of those threads.
Yeah, those are 5 really great points, right? So I heard thinking big, wide adoption, expertise, accelerate, teamwork, and the thought that is kind of rolling around in my head here as you talk through those, Kev, was how the cloud really has kind of levels the playing field for organizations. We're seeing this in our own clients where we're having conversations around delivering product and getting it in the cloud for companies that maybe we wouldn't have traditionally done work with. They were on the smaller end. They were innovative, and as opposed to some of the more traditional larger enterprises. But today that the game is different and the landscape looks very different, and so everybody can have a seat at the table. Well, thanks for that, Kevin. Tony, maybe this would be a good time to do our second poll. We want to think a little bit around kind of how you use cloud and the business case behind it. There's this assertion that modern application development is different than traditional and requires a slightly different kind of business case. So this poll question reads, what's the primary reason you leverage the cloud or are considering leveraging the cloud in your business? So we've given you a couple of choices there. You might be looking at it to expand your customer base, looking for cost savings. We know some organizations are looking at cloud to launch new sources of revenue. It might be improving your customer experience, or it might be for another reason that we haven't captured here. But we love your thoughts on why the cloud. I'll give you guys another minute. Okay, 10 seconds, get your answers in. Okay, maybe we'll close it there, Tony. That's probably a good sample of kind of a representative sample anyways of the people that we have with us today. Thank you for doing that. So I see cost savings at the top, improve customer experience. We'll have to have another session to capture some of the reasons that we missed there. But Larry, I'm wondering, when you look at this list and you think about the work that you're doing with clients around the world, what are the primary reasons that you are hearing for why they're going, those organizations are going to the cloud? And perhaps you could just kind of weigh in on what they have to do differently from the beginning if they really want to unlock the value.
So that's a great question, Cheryl. And I think the key thing I am seeing is customers needing agility in different dimensions in their business. The CEOs I work with, their business imperative is no longer to squeeze the last few percent out of an existing value chain, last few percent of profit. They're trying to fend off disruption. They're looking at competitors. They maybe have physical products or kind of old world legacy products. They need to transform those products. They need to do it in a way that they can do it in fast iterative learning cycles and expand their markets. In some cases, they're trying to hedge their physical product revenue and because of things like the pandemic. In other cases, they're trying to transform themselves and transform from physical product companies to digital product companies. And let me give you an example. I was working with a business unit and a client about a year ago. We're evaluating products for them, off-the-shelf products for a particular application. We had a kind of a legacy vendor with a large monolithic application that clearly had superior functionality. We had another vendor who was cloud native, born in the cloud, using cloud technology, using modern DevOps practices, had the ability to release features every 2 weeks if they chose to. When I talked to the first vendor, they proudly told me that they had a new release every 12 to 15 months. And I said to the business, we don't really need to spend too much detail on the features here. Who do you think is going to win this race and survive in this particular scenario? So to me, it's the agility. It's I can provision new environments quickly. I think the cloud has been the single biggest catalyst for innovation in history. A small company with an idea can spin up a new product quickly. They can match their expense with their revenue as their business grows. They can scale in the cloud. And I don't think those ideas and those companies would have emerged before the cloud. The ability to take small steps just as fast as a big company is the small company's superpower, I think. And many of the companies I talk to say that we had no idea how people were going to use our product till we actually put it out there. I'm thinking of some of the new metaverse capabilities that we've been looking at. They had no idea how creative people would be starting to use some of those products. I don't need to meet, but I can't run my business without an art gallery. So I'm going to use your platform to build virtual art galleries and do business during the pandemic. The companies that stood these platforms up had no idea how these things would be used. So I think you get greater resiliency, greater scalability, more responsiveness, iterative learning cycles. And to me, that all leads to agility if you have the right architecture, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
So Kevin, I mean, that's a great example Larry just shared. And those are great reasons why people are moving to the cloud or with the cloud. But what do they have to do different at the beginning? Like, what is the difference between that? You know, we talk about business cases, you know, and getting it right from the beginning. What do you have to really have locked down before you can get going if you're going to kind of adopt a modern application development approach?
Well, I mean, I think the modern applications, you know, really talk about technology and you know, when we're talking about business cases, we're talking about how that's applied. So what you know, as I think you could use the technology to do process automation and efficiency and sort of rebuild and make more agile, you know, existing legacy applications, you know, to make a case to say, you know, let's make things refactor, reimagine them into microservices-based architectures that we can use to compose and more rapidly build things. So those are different kind of business cases. I mean, we're not building, you know, a single application there. We're sort of thinking for the future. But again, it all comes back to customer experience. So in that poll, I noticed that there was a lot of focus on cost savings, but the second long bar, I can't remember which one was bigger, was customer experience, because, you know, so many of the existing, internal processes are covered by out of the box software, you know, commercial software. It's not like, you know, many decades ago where we had to build that stuff. It exists, but when it comes to customer experience, we have new ground for serving customers, creating new points of value for those users, and sometimes we can charge money for that. So, you know, whether it's like Larry was talking about understanding, you know, a new way to squeeze more revenue out of an existing physical product. We had a client of ours who had a physical product. Normally they would add features to it at an increment every time they released a new version of this physical product, and they had just entered into mode where they were cloud enabling this product, and they were going to sell advanced features, and the transition they're making is from sell it once, get the profit and that's it, to more of a subscription model. So you're setting up this continuous value you can provide through the cloud to that customer, and generate new revenue. And I think that's where a lot of Larry's clients are looking, is like, where is their white space or blank space for that customer, and what things we can do for them, and how can a digital strategy and building applications on the cloud, using modern application development type techniques, how do we do that? So it's really a lot of, in my career, it feels like the first 2/3 of it was more focused on reducing cost and generating efficiency, but the last third has definitely been about expanding into new markets, finding new revenue, increasing customer bases, those kinds of those. And frankly, they're interesting. There's interesting business cases.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think this question really gets to that. It's not the same, right? The more traditional approaches we've taken to application development and the expectations we had on how that product or solution is going to deliver value is different than how we need to approach a modern app dev framework or mentality for the cloud. And so the old way doesn't work. We need a new way.
I think there's some expectation that these products pay for themselves along the way. So we would spend in the early 2000s maybe 2 years building a new product, building a big enterprise or custom ERP type product, which would take many years to pay back. Whereas the products we build today are built in 3 months, 6 months, and maybe they're not the full implementation of the vision, but they're starting to generate value and engagement with customers, and they sort of form that kind of basis for, hey, we could also do this, we could also do that. And so there's less, the business case, again, a little less monolithic, risky, a lot of outlay of cash before there's any return. And it helps us zero in on what do customers want, right?
Thanks. So let's shift perspectives just a little bit. Like, there's lots we could talk about on business case and the value we want from these things. But let's think about architecture. I know we've got some real technical folks on this in the session today, and let me offer up another poll. So this is our third poll. This is, I think, our last poll. So we're not going to pull you to death. But Tony, while you get that ready, I think kind of the question at the outset is kind of, so if we're going to do this thing, we're going to build these modern apps in the cloud, and we've got our business case right, and we know what we're trying to do. What team do we need to pull this off? Kevin talked about expertise as sometimes a barrier and a place where our team often comes in and helps. But what do you see in your organizations? How is your team resourced? Is it mostly legacy developers and architects? Is it mostly cloud native developers and architects? Do you have an even mix? You're not sure? Because I think when we think about trying to build out cloud architecture, we need to know who's going to be doing it, and making sure that we have the right skills to actually make these solutions, set them up for success so we can realize the value we're looking for. So I'll give you just a minute here.
While we do that,
go ahead, please, Larry.
While we do that, while we wait, just one caveat on the cost reduction side. So, the cloud is seductive, right? Very easy to spin up new services. Make sure your architects also understand, when they're putting together solutions, the cost of the services going forward, because environments multiply like rabbits, costs mount, and you need to really understand the cost basis for the solution that's being assembled, because it's very attractive. But just put that cost management process and framework in place first.
Yeah, it's really valuable perspective, and really interesting to see how our audience kind of responds to the poll. If we've got mostly legacy developers and architects, are we thinking about costs in the cloud the same, the right way? Are we framing it up with the right variables? Thanks for responding, everybody. So we're gonna, I kind of got Adam. I know he's anxious to weigh in here, but before I go to him, Larry, I'm wondering, can you comment on what you see in that poll? Is that kind of what you expect? Is that what you're seeing play out? And what do we need on our teams?
Yeah, I'm going to say go team legacy. I'm going to be the devil's advocate. Maybe I think you need even mix of both, and I'll tell you why. I think legacy considerations matter in the cloud. I think there's no free lunch. You still need to do fundamental things, understand fundamental design principles, do your homework, but the cloud does have newer ways of thinking that you understand. So I think it's a cross-pollination of the two things. When I say legacy considerations, I'm thinking of classic design heuristics that we've used for a long time that enable your cloud application to be agile, more secure, more resilient. So modularity, microservices is a good example. I'm an enterprise architect. I'm always looking at solutions in microservices and understanding what we can use across the whole enterprise. Build things once and share them across multiple clients, multiple products, multiple lines of business. Loose coupling, easier to deploy. So microservice architectures again, with only interacting through APIs. That kind of granularity gives you less risk, more resiliency to failure. It scales cost effectively, improves security, as Adam will talk about. And loose coupling through understanding what's synchronous in your application and what can be asynchronous, and using things like event-driven architectures to enable you to integrate multiple platforms to push lower priority functionality out to asynchronous processes. There's some great AWS services for using that. Things as simple as Lambda, or it could be EventBridge or SNS or other streaming services. Second physical thing, and I'll try and go through this quickly, is latency. So the cloud did not repeal the law of physics. It still takes 70 milliseconds coast to coast round trip. It feels like the cloud is everywhere, but it's not. It's only in certain physical locations. So when you understand your application, and the kinds of things I'm working with are hybrid cloud architectures with data centers in US states, with cloud services and multiple cloud providers nailed down somewhere in the AWS cloud. We need to understand that latency. We need to understand the performance characteristics, and we need to design to allow for that. Third thing Kevin touched on was use cloud native services. Don't try and race the cloud provider. What they've built into their regional infrastructure, their data centers, into their compute foundation, into the storage foundation, into networking, you can never compete with cost effectively. I'm not sure why you would want to, because you should be putting your IP, your energy into your IP in the application, and not building services that already exist. But you want to use abstraction to encapsulate those services, because you may evolve them over time. So use native services, but make sure they're encapsulated so you've got the flexibility of changing things. The other thing I would say around loose coupling is much easier to scale agile up to larger teams. And finally, you need to build up an architecture runway, as we say when we use SAFe as a scaling agile method. You have to do the design work up front. You need to understand the enabling technologies you're going to use and put those architecture enablers in place to enable the feature teams to build. I mean, I think ultimately all those things come back to agility, which is, to me, really one of the key reasons that we want to use cloud in the first place.
Yeah, I fully agree, Larry. I think especially your points about not forgetting the fundamentals. Now we're in cloud. We have the ability to dynamically provision. We have the ability to essentially pull additional services to get new capabilities into our applications more off the shelf than we really could before. But it doesn't change that the underlying services still operate with the same fundamentals as they did before. Like I see a question already about data sovereignty and data location storage. Yep. So there's things like that still exist. So I think that one of the biggest keys to architecting application is to really understand leverage and understand that these services are being developed by really large groups of developers and architects and IT personnel, and to use those products. It's really key to understand the spirit, or at least the interpretation of what those components do, so that you can use them effectively, so that you can actually bring them into your projects and use them as they were intended to be used. So that part doesn't go away. You still have to know kind of how it's working under the scenes, but you have the ability, as a result of these massive teams developing these these tools and offering them on a per use basis to be able to dynamically provision them easier than ever before. And that really cuts down on a lot of the kinds of things that you might be doing as a value providing company. It really cuts out a lot of the what we used to call kind of boilerplate or scaffolding code, or repetitive kind of tasks as a developer and architect that really the earlier part of my career was really based in, and instead changes it to understanding how these reusable components were developed and how to make them work efficiently together. Each of the cloud platforms has their own biases on how they're going to implement this particular kind of database service and exactly what that interface looks like. They're all pretty much the same from an interfacing point of view, but to understand like exactly how those things are hosted, how they fail over when things have troubles, how to weave security throughout them, spoil my own topic a little bit, and to really be able to assemble those things together in an efficient manner that's somewhere between what you as a company want to do to deliver the value to your customers and the original spirit and kind of ideals and mission statements that come with these tools out of the box.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to that question on sensitive data just quickly because I see some good questions here. One of my clients is one of the most highly regulated industries there is. Compliance testing of various types. We store card data. We're not tokenizing. We can't tokenize due to the fraud requirements. Fraud detection requirements we have, and we host it in the cloud. And we're running applications on shared infrastructure where databases are encrypted using a key specific to that client. Most of the AWS services have client-specific encryption keys. If you want to build a SaaS application, all data is encrypted in transit. A lot of the security controls that Adam will probably talk about in the next section, but the security is built into these services from the ground up. So I'd argue that they're far more secure than if we tried to implement it ourselves.
And there's interfaces there too as well. I mean, we've like you said, we've kind of seen it all as far as data classification and data sensitivity concerns. There's plenty of regulatory requirements and government requirements and standards that we've had to help our clients implement as a result of that. That kind of follow that thing. And there's lots of tools in and around the actual cloud platforms themselves that let you express the kinds of requirements that you need to within, such as tagging, such as splitting up accounts and subclassifying into organizational units. There's a lot of different kinds of mechanisms, let's say, that you can actually use to make that system look the way you need it to, depending on whatever kind of body you're beholden to.
Yeah, we can talk more about that when we get deeper into security.
So let's do that then. Let's kind of have a look at how do you ensure that your cloud environment is secure and stays that way. And Adam, I know this is a topic you are passionate about. I'd love to get your take on security in the context of modern applications in the cloud. What do we need to collectively understand that ensures that, we're making security in today and that it holds up tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think the first key there is the same kind of strength of the cloud that we've been talking to, where you can dynamically provision and you can get to production faster than ever before. The caveat of that is that now you're in production faster than ever before. In fact, your developers are likely touching some kind of code that we would consider to be in production years ago, right? It's being hosted on public interfaces potentially, and it is running with common interfaces, and it can be attacked. It used to be a responsibility that was maybe someone's, it was protected by a network segment, or it wasn't necessarily publicly hosted. But quite often, even initial developer projects are not being configured with public-facing abilities in mind. And so that's one of those kind of realizations, is that you're in production faster than ever before, but you really have to understand that security needs to take place right at that initial outset, and then kind of keep with your product all the way through. So you need to start thinking about those concerns right away. As much as possible, like, I would highly recommend weaving those security responsibilities throughout the development lifecycle, even in early design, to be able to lay the proper groundwork and protect the products all the way through. I'd say that's the first key, kind of, understand how the security implications affect the software development lifecycle. And also to understand that, security operations have that same capability that your applications in general have. All the cloud providers have baked some of those tools that provide security operations, monitoring, disaster recovery, some of the other kind of concepts of security that's not just protect, but also detect, restore, recover. Those capabilities have all been built into their own cloud services themselves, and so they have the same strength, and often they have the same capabilities and same spirit of the tools in mind. So now developers can start teaching security professionals a thing or two about automation, about weaving things throughout platforms consistently, and through developing platforms and solutions that start small. Some security initiatives can be very small. They can solve very targeted things, and you can start getting governance benefits at very light intervals, and they can be just as agile as the application development sequences themselves.
Yeah, talk more about that automation, because when you and I talked offline, Adam, prior to this, one of the things that jumped out to me was your passion for the automation of tasks as a sort of a latent security stance that would help proactively prevent things like elevation of permissions or other kinds of threats that happen in this cloud environment that's public.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, it's really important to understand all the configuration options that are out there to take advantage of the components to the best of their capability, and to understand how they're best going to fit within your architecture. And it's exactly the same for security. I mean, often there's encryption settings or hosting options, tagging abilities, all these kinds of extra components that don't necessarily directly touch the value of your application, but they're really key for your security posture. Mm-hmm. And to understand those and how to configure those, and then on top of that, to set proper guardrails around your software development lifecycle, such that once you have decided, these are the right parameters for our product, these are the right configurations for how we're going to deploy and how we're going to keep ourselves safe in the cloud. You can set up guardrails and even automated solutions for correcting solutions that stay out of that, so that it can, if someone decides to, for example, launch an instance that doesn't have an encrypted drive backing it or something like that, you can set up an automation to detect that, and then you can even go so far as to automatically deprovision the instance, when it's configured in an insecure way. This gives you the power to distribute distribute kind of quoted resources out to the most agile layer, that layer of your teams that are actually developing the instance, they're creating new product, but you still get the control on the other side of it to be able to make sure that the people at that high rate of change layer are operating within guardrails.
And I'd also encourage you to really leverage what the cloud providers put together. They've put an enormous amount of effort in their security models and guidelines. So in AWS, that's the shared responsibility model. AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So regional data centers, infrastructure, compute, storage, database, networking, and software, whether it's Kubernetes control plane or what have you. You're responsible for your software and your customer data. But if you're implementing PCI, for instance, you're handling card data. There's a very extensive set of guidelines that map the PCI control standard to AWS products, settings, configurations, and what you need to do in your implementation. So it can save you an enormous amount of time in satisfying those standards, because the cloud is, somewhat uniform parts of it, and the provider has done all that homework for you already, or a lot of it.
That's another great point. It's all, I tend to say that it's all about control or exactly about that responsibility. Who owns the configuration of the particular component, or who owns the keys that actually encrypt the piece of data? That's a really key concept in understanding how to, in the case of PCI, keep as much of your application stack out of scope so that it lowers your audit costs and keeps your implementation streamlined. An application obviously gets more expensive to maintain the more of it that happens to be in scope of auditing. Yeah. So
and higher risk, right? Well, ultimately, that's the
that's and the reason for that is because of the increased risk. Exactly. So to really scope that correctly, it's incredibly key to understand who is responsible for the safety mechanisms at any point throughout the architecture.
This is, I'm kind of glancing at the time. I'm sensitive to it, and we probably need to bring this to a close. But I feel like, we could have taken any one of these topics or questions and sat on it for an hour. There's so much here that we could unpack. So maybe we'll, for the sake of time, we'll pause and wrap up here. But let me just kind of offer a thanks, Larry, Adam, Kevin. A great conversation. I knew it would be. And for those of you that joined us today, I know we're just scratching the tips here. And so I'd invite you, if you'd like to reach out to these guys directly. Tomorrow you're going to get a note with a copy of the slides and the recording from our colleague Trisha Urix. So be watching your inboxes for that. But Trisha can also help kind of broker, an introduction directly to these guys if you'd like to set up a one-on-one meeting, or you can pop something in the chat. I know that both, all Larry, Adam, and Kevin would be happy to connect with you offline and